رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم جاهلون قالوا سلاما. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest of salawat as condolences to the remainder of Zahra, Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم. May Allah increase our reward for the continuous commemoration of the masa'ib and the difficulties of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. In our continuing discussion that we've been having over the past series of nights, we've talked a lot about personal development and personal aspects of how we bring about change within our life, and how we give focus to various aspects of our faith that, yes, we know we should be doing, but how do we bring them into focus and how do we apply them? In the continuation of this conversation tonight, one of the aspects that we want to take a look at is the interaction of a mu'min and society. That's how do we as Muslimin approach society as its whole, and how do we distinguish the rights and the appropriate mannerisms with which we address the various members of our communities and our societies. Especially in a country, in these Western countries, where there's a bigger mix of different types of people, and we find ourselves in the minority communities, or we find ourselves in one section of a community that interacts with many other identities and personalities around us, it's very hard to figure out what are my roles and responsibilities in interacting with each of these individuals. Now, again, a 40-minute, 1-hour lecture isn't going to give you a conclusive approach to how to handle every single particular situation that you come across in your day-to-day life. But the idea is to recognize that while it may have been for people in Muslim countries that when they approach society, they approach it with a broad brushstroke, that everybody is a Muslim, everybody is someone who has the same faith, and we treat everybody in the same fashion. When it comes to living in a Western society, the rights and regulations and the position that we give to various people based upon their backgrounds and their ability to impact us is different. What I mean to say is while it may have been that previous generations living in Muslim-based countries didn't have the responsibility to differentiate between how to interact with various members of society, because you stepped out of the house and the greeting you gave everybody was Assalamu alaikum. Or your community had its own location where it had its own independent identity and you didn't interact with many people from outside. Versus now, when we step outside, we find that Assalamu alaikum is actually the exception to the rule of greeting. It's rare for us to have the opportunity to spend time with only Muslimin on a day-to-day basis, but rather we interact with many different people. And we have to learn that, okay, just because this person is a creation of Allah, he has rights upon me and I have rights upon him. That's very true. But does he have the same right to influence me the same way a mu'min does? Does he have the same rights upon me that I should keep him as my close proximal friend and association? Or is it that I need to be conscientious to differentiate how I interact with these people? You see, one person may come to you with the aspect and say to you that in the Quran, Allah has given us the rule that He says, وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ, and the worshippers of the merciful Allah are the ones who walk on this earth with humility. That they walk on this earth with humility, meaning that I as a Muslim am humble, and whoever comes to me, I deal with him with humility. وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمْ جَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. And if an ignorant person comes to them and speaks to them, now remember, an ignorant person who comes to them and speaks to them with, for example, foolish words, or makes a false claim, or abuses them, or treats them in an unfair fashion, that he replies to them, salam, with peace, with a peaceful word. Now, if we were to look at this and apply it as a blanket ruling across all of society, we would say that, oh, no matter who we interact with, we should just be kind to them. And to some extent that's true, but it doesn't indicate that there are other rights and regulations and responsibilities and other formats of interacting that I should have with various members of society. And briefly, there are various verses of the Quran where Allah takes the time to explain to you that, hey, no, be careful about how you interact with various parts of society. What is the rule and regulation? You see, for a mu'min, there is a danger. We have a verse of Quran where Allah talks about that on the day of judgment there will be those who will bite at their hands out of the worry of where their deeds have taken them and what their associations brought them. And they will complain to Allah and they will pray on that day, Ya laytani lam attakhidh fulanan khalila. Laqad adhallani ba'da idh ja'a as-sabila alayh. That there will be those people who on the day of judgment amongst the mu'mineen, who when they receive their book of deeds, when they receive their a'mal, when they see their condition on the day of judgment, they will complain, oh, I wish I had not taken so-and-so as my friend. He misguided me after Allah gave me the guidance from Him. So meaning that Allah guides us, He's given, this is the people who had the guidance, they knew the right path of what they should be doing on this earth, but by their associations of being ignorant of how to interact with various peoples in society, they made bad choices. They didn't learn to differentiate between the people in society of who has the right to influence them and what way they should be influenced by that individual. And they suffered the consequences because they became distracted by dunya and they got lost in this world. Our goal when we take a look at this world and we take a look at the verse of this Quran that Allah is giving us is that we understand that yes, we are designated to be the best example in society. We are designated as the ones who should know the best etiquette to deal with every environment, but it doesn't mean that everybody is treated the same. No, rather we have to be conscientious of who has what right of influence over us and how we deal with each individual. So our goal is that yes, I have to be careful, that I have to mitigate and I have to be careful about how I deal with each individual. The same way, for example, a nutritionist will tell you, not all food is the same. A dietitian or nutritionist, I think you guys use the same word, right? We all speak English, but the terms I have to use are different here. I get caught off sometimes. A nutritionist will tell you not all food is the same. You can't treat your proteins and carbohydrates the same. You have to be conscientious to give things a balance, that your intake is correct. The same way when it comes to our society, we don't treat all people the same. Rather, we have to be careful that we ensure that we're protecting our faith that is important, that come tomorrow, based on the interactions of society. I don't lose out of something that is important to me. I don't step away from what's important in my faith. So we want to take a look at three groups and three descriptions that Allah has given us and develop a little bit of an understanding of these. That one, how Allah describes to deal with those who don't accept Islam, and then two, how to deal with Ahl al-Kitab, and three, amongst the Muslimin, how we should be interacting. So with your loudest of salawat, we'll begin our discussion. In our first category of dealing with those who don't believe in Allah, there are 2 points that we want to bring about. First, in the verse of Quran, Allah says, وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّ اللَّهُ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ إِلْمٍ. That Allah says, be careful when you deal with those who don't believe in Allah or believe in gods other than Allah, those who may have no faith. Don't approach them with foul language. Don't use foul language with them. This term of sub implies the use of bad language, and this bad language is something we need to address. But first, let's take a look at the apparent nature, that when we deal with individuals who are not followers of Islam or not followers of the monotheistic Abrahamic faiths, Allah is giving the instruction to be conscientious of the language and the tone that you use with them. Don't use abusive language. Now, one of the simple parallels of how we draw and we understand the consequence of the use of foul language or abusive language in association with someone's faith is to understand that many times, when we talked about a few nights ago as well, the idea that Allah has put signs in His creation for us to recognize His presence on this earth. Allah has put intellectual design or intelligent design as a sign to recognize the presence of one creator. He's given us narrations. He says, when you think about and you look at this earth and you see the harmony in all of existence and creation, it should bring to you the realization that there is only one creator. Had there been another creator, you would have seen conflict between these two entities. But the absence of conflict should indicate to you that there is one creator. What we see is that this is teaching us that the intellectual, when he looks at the earth and he looks at the signs of the earth, he recognizes that there is a creator present who has given him the signs and shown him through the structure of creation that this is an intelligent design and that someone has created this. When we talk about an atheist or a polytheist, right, we're implying that this is someone who has taken his faith as a tradition. This is someone who has taken his faith as something that he has inherited. The same way we see when the Anbiya used to approach people and they would say, follow Allah, they say, no, we follow that which our forefathers used to follow. As in Surah Luqman is the description of how when you tell them to follow the faith of Allah, they say, no, we will keep on the path that our forefathers were on. What that's telling you is that one aspect of approach, I'm not giving you absolute statements, I'm giving you generalizations to bring the conversation to point to the conclusion of how our interaction needs to be. That an individual who follows a faith that submits himself to either atheism or polytheism or stays outside of the bounds of a faith that acknowledges the presence of one God is doing so as a tradition, as something he's inherited, as something he has a sense of loyalty to. When that individual has a sense of loyalty to something, it's not a logical or intellectual reason that he has a loyalty to that item. It's a relationship based on emotion. And when you approach someone with emotion, if you approach them with harshness, they turn around to you and they say, I don't care what you have to say. And they say, if you insult me, now I'll insult you. Let me give you an example. You guys are all football fans, right? What's one of the football teams? Again, football is not my thing. Basketball. What was that one? Chelsea. Give me another one. Arsenal. Okay, sorry. I'm going to take these two. I don't know anything about anything of these, okay? So I'm being very honest with you. That's my disclosure right now. An Arsenal fan goes to a Chelsea fan. Your team is horrible. They can't score a goal for their life. They make horrible trades. What's the immediate reaction of that Chelsea fan? He's going to find it a necessity now that I have to insult the Arsenal fan. He's going to find it that now there has to be conflict. Why? Because you took something that was personal, that I have an emotional connection to, and you attacked it. You came against it. And my logic for loving this team or loving this is personal. It's something that I believe in. So when you come to me with harshness, my reaction is to reply with harshness. So Allah is telling you, He says, don't use foul language, don't use harsh terminology when you deal with someone whose only interaction with his face is based on emotional loyalty. Because then he will turn around and insult and curse towards Allah. Adwan bighayri ilm. Without knowing Allah, without knowing the characteristics of Allah, he will see it as a tit-for-tat situation. You came at me, I have to come at you. That when we deal with someone who we may believe that their interaction or their structure of their faith is not on an intellectual basis, that how can you believe in 700 gods? I don't know of any religion that has 700 gods, but maybe there is one. Or you don't believe in any God, and we start insulting that person's intellect, and we start using harsh terminology with that individual. What happens is that person turns around and he never looks at, is there something within Islam that intellectually is sound with me? He'll never make that connection. The only memory he'll have of Islam is the idea that a Muslim is someone who attacks my faith, so therefore he must be someone who is a very lowly individual and doesn't have the ability to have an intellectual conversation. That we don't want to get into the idea of getting into these uses of terminology to insult someone, because that connection was never based on intellect. That following of faith was never based on intellect. You see, one of the aspects and the ways in which we introduce Islam, the recommended process of introducing Islam to people, is through akhlaq, is through character and mannerism. Not to go out on a pulpit and preach to people, oh, you infidels. God forbid, we don't do things like that. That's not Islam. Look at the example of our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He spent 40 years amongst the worst of people simply to teach them the character that Iman brings about in an individual. Because when people would see that character of our Holy Prophet, they would find within it items that would attract them to the faith of Islam. The same way you and I, when we go out into society and we want to represent Islam, it's not about the words that we use. It's about when people look at us that they see the best examples of character present within us. That I can't go up to a person without knowing him and knowing what his lifestyle is like and know what would appeal to him within Islam. Maybe, for example, someone who doesn't believe in Islam, the appeal to Islam is the process of how we pay attention to the food that we put in our mouth, and the food must be halal. Maybe someone who looks at Islam looks at the beauty and the regiment of salah 5 times a day or 3 times a day, however many times you sit and you take your break from salah and you go to pray, and he sees the beauty of your commitment to approaching Allah on a daily basis. And that gives him attraction to Islam. Maybe it's the word of Allah in the Quran, that as soon as he reads the Quran, he sees the beauty in the word of Allah and he says, this is truth and this is haqq. Maybe he sees you as sadiq, as a truthful person, and he sees that as the characteristic that says, if your truthfulness is based off of your faith, that's the faith I want to have. In the US, for example, we had a number of individuals, and I met a few of them, who were military men. Stationed in Afghanistan and Iraq, and when they came back to the States, they came to the masajid and they said, we want to accept Islam. And we were like, what happened? They said, you see, we were the ones who were sent to train the local people. And after living with them for a number of years and seeing their character and their demeanor and the truthfulness of their speech and behavior, when we came back, we found ourselves uncomfortable with the operation of society. We did not like the characteristics present in this society. Rather, what we saw over there in how people behaved and how they interacted with one another and the faith that they professed and the yaqeen and certainty they had in Allah, we want those characteristics for ourselves and our children. Look with what intention they went and what they came back with. Because the akhlaq was present to demonstrate that character that we wanted to show for Islam. So when it comes to dealing with someone who does not have an intellectual foundation or a fundamental of faith, and his faith is a system of loyalty, Allah's command is, be careful of the language you use with him. Don't use harsh terms with him. Don't be someone who insults him, because that insult will be taken as an emotional response, and then instead of being interested in coming towards Allah, he'll be an enemy of Allah and Islam. And we don't want to create that sentiment amongst people. The other point in this verse that we want to talk about is the term of sob and using of foul language. You see, the countries and the cultures that we live in don't differentiate in the terminology that we utilize amongst individuals on a day-to-day basis. That foul language has become so normal of speech in society that it's not differentiated between, it's not considered low class or high class, or there's no differentiation. Everybody uses it in every instance. But Islam hasn't given us that freedom to use foul language. We see the narrations of our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. إن الله حرم جنة على كل فحاش بضيء قليل الحياة لا يبالي ما قال وَمَا قِيلَ لَهُ. That our Prophet taught us, he says that Allah has made heaven forbidden upon the one who uses foul language, who uses vulgarity and obscenities, and who has no self-respect for himself, who does not care about what he says and what is said about him. You see, this is why we're having this conversation, because the environment we live in can influence us. And the environment we live in has no differentiation of using these terms or not using them. But Islam is very specific that we don't use these terms. Our Prophet taught us that this is something that will keep you away from heaven if you're not careful about the terminology you use. That this is not the characteristic of a mu'min to use this language. What we have to do is we have to set ourselves apart in society to demonstrate these characteristics of what is Islam. You see, in society, in these societies, everybody is looking to develop an identity. We're looking for someone to identify with who represents our values, our customs and cultures, or that we want to be associated with a characteristic or culture. But the best character and culture that we want to be associated with is that Islam. And the association of Islam is such that it needs to stand out in society. You have to be like our Prophet was, the light amongst the darkness. The character amongst the society that represents what is the best of humanity. When we see the statement of our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam, if there should even be a town that has 10,000 people in it. Now remember, 10,000 people in today's day and age is not that big of a deal. But look at Hijaz. Look at what the Arab towns were like. That 10,000 was considered a large town. And the Imam is saying, should there even be a town that has 10,000 people in it, if there is even one individual who claims to be our Shia and does not have the best character in that town, if there is somebody in that town who has better character than our Shia, then those people are not our Shia. That to be follower of Ali Muhammad, that you have to be the light in society, and the first step to that is step away from this foul language. Step away from these vulgarities and these things. Make it something that people should never imagine that you as an honorable individual would ever utter such a word from your mouth. The same way our Holy Prophet said, وَمَا أَفْشَهُ قَرِيمٌ قَتْ, that a noble personality will never use foul language. We should have no association with this terminology, and we need to teach our children that it's not okay to say these things. What happens is many times the child doesn't learn vulgarity from school. When he's walking around with his father and his father uses it in the market or someplace, the child learns, oh, okay, it's okay if I say that too then. If the elder said it, then it's okay if I say it. You see, we are the examples for that next generation. When we are in this location, whether you realize it or not, and look back on your own life and you think about it, that there are examples who you met along your way who became the role model that you followed. Sometimes that was a parent, sometimes that was a member of community, sometimes that was someone who drove a nice car, someone that was traveling or came back, or for whatever reason, we selected people whose example we decided to follow. And when we come and we sit in a hall like this, which is a mixed group of all different ages, there are children who are watching the older examples. Whether that's a 10-year-old watching a 15 watching a 20, a 20 watching a 30 watching, mashallah, don't look at me. The point is that each one of these individuals is looking at the example. When we enter into this arena, forget the outside community for a second. Forget everybody else outside. But when we are not conscientious of the terms that we are using or how we are describing one another, we are making it okay for our children to utilize those terms for one another as well. We're not utilizing the environment correctly then. We're putting our children in danger then of falling off the path. It's not the outside influence at the moment. It's the internal influence. When we become desensitized to this language, when we become desensitized to these terms, we now go and make it okay for the next generation. There should never be an instance in which there is foul language that is used by me, and if I hear it around me, I ask the one, if I need to speak to you, I ask you, please don't use those terms with me. I don't listen, there's another way to convey your message. Let's use other terminology. Let's not use that. I don't like, listen, if you have to say that, then I can't continue this conversation. Maintain your dignity and respect. Don't let people force you into a position that you have to disrespect yourself. And watch how the environment changes. How people, when they come to you, they recognize that I have to behave in a fashion that's appropriate. Otherwise, I don't have the permission to talk to this person. And it's not a source of harshness, but rather a reality of the situation that I respect myself and I won't let you disrespect me. So this is the two parts that we take a look at, that when we take a look at dealing with people who don't have the monotheistic faiths, of how we deal with them. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The people of the book, we take a look and we see, which is the next segment of society, that Islam has given them a different status and position. When we take a look in the Quran, we take a look and we see Allah says, وَلَا تُجَادِلُوا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا الَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْهُمْ وَقُولُوا إنما وقولوا آمنا بالذي أنزل إلينا وما أنزل إليكم وإلهنا وإلهكم واحد ونحن له مسلمون. That Allah is telling us that He says, don't debate and argue with the people of the book except in that fashion which is the best. Have the best of rapport with them except those who are unjust. That just because a person is Ahl al-Kitab and Allah has commanded us to have good relations with them, it's not okay if that person is unjust that I need to maintain relations. No, it's more important that if that person is not just, I don't keep that relation at all. But if they are of Ahl al-Kitab and they are good people and they are decent people, speak to them in the best of fashions. Keep decent relations with them. And say to them that we believe in that which was sent down to us and that which was sent down to you. Your God and our God is one, and we worship Him. That's our goal. That there is similarity between these, and that we should keep good relations with these people. We take a look and we see, for example, even Sayyid Khomeini, when he was exiled and he came to France, we read the stories and we've seen in history that when the time of Christmas came, he went and he acknowledged them and he gave them gifts of the people that were living around him. It was not considered something that was inappropriate, because why? That was their faith. And it's okay. Let them have their faith and we can associate with them and deal with them. When we want to see, for example, the position of how we should treat them and that they should be treated well and that they are members of society who we should be conscientious and treat them with kindness because they are of the Abrahamic nasl. This Abrahamic tradition that we talk about is all those monotheistic faiths that originated from the source of Nabi Ibrahim. Now Nabi Ibrahim, right? Ismail and Ishaq. Ismail, from Ismail's lineage comes Rasulullah, and from Ishaq comes Nabi Musa and Nabi Isa. That all of these are of the monotheistic faiths that originate from Nabi Ibrahim, hence they're referred to as Abrahamic faiths. We want to see this. We take a look at the example of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. That when he accepted the Khilafat, he said, this Khilafat is worth less to me than the mucus that comes out of a goat's nose. And he says, I don't take this authority except to fight the one who is unjust and to support the one who is madloom and abused. And on this principle, Amir al-Mu'mineen accepted the position of Khilafat, and his entire time period, other than the wars that he was in, was always in the support of helping those who had been abused or treated not well. In one of these instances, when Amir al-Mu'mineen travels to one of the towns, he goes to the town and he goes to the marketplace. In the marketplace, he finds a blind beggar sitting on the side of the road begging. And he turns to the people of the community. He says, why is this person? Who is this person? Why is he on the road? Why is he begging? They said, oh, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he's not Muslim. Okay. Well, you see, he used to be a day laborer. He's a Christian. He was a day laborer. And he used to work every day and earn his income, and he would survive on this basis. But as he got older, he lost his sight. When he lost his sight, he became unable to be a day laborer. And since he was one of those people who lived hand to mouth, that whatever he earned, he ate, as soon as he lost the ability to earn, he lost the ability to eat. And therefore, he wound up a beggar on the streets now. That's the story. So Amir al-Mu'mineen turned to the community, he turned to the people, he says, so it was good enough that when he was capable to work, you took his energy, you took his power from him, you took his support from him, and now when he is in need, that you've left him alone to die like this? That it was okay for you to use him when he was beneficial to you, and now that he's not beneficial, you've cast him aside and he's not your problem as a society? He said, no. As of tomorrow, I insist that you, as the Baytul Mal has the responsibility to give him his cost of living as well too. That we treat these relationships with respect and to have interaction with them is a good thing and it's okay. But we have to be conscious that there is a difference between someone who I associate with and someone who is my close friend. And this is a distinction we have to make, and we have to make within ourselves, that you see, that friend, as we mentioned, has the ability to influence my affairs and my decisions in life. That friend is my close compatriot who I go to for advice in my matters, who's aware of my affairs in my house. That friend is the one who will give me guidance. If that friend of mine does not share my values, if that friend of mine does not have the same qibla or the same goals in life, when I go to him for advice, or he becomes my advisor in my affairs, he will not understand my priorities and how I want to live my life. That it's good that we keep relations with Ahl al-Kitab and we keep relations with society and we deal with them kindly, but the status of a friend is not something we give lightly to just anyone. You see, for our children and for ourselves when we're young, our friends, who are the first friends that we make? They're the ones that we see in school, right? And because we go to school, they become our friends and we see them 8 hours a day, 7 hours a day, or however many hours children are kept in school these days. You see them, and what happens is this person becomes my friend. Why? Really what that is, that's a friend of convenience, right? It's someone who lives close to me, who I see on a day-to-day basis and is going through the same experience as me, and therefore I have some similarity that I can build an association with him, or that we can pass the time together in a good condition. And there's nothing wrong with that. To be friendly with people, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I need to recognize is that, one, when I start making my decisions of how I deal with my parents, my family, or I live my life, because of the influence of this friend upon me, that friend doesn't quite understand me. He doesn't know what my priorities in life are. He doesn't know what my faith has taught me about the relationship with my parents, my goals in life, my focal point in what I want to achieve and who I want to be. That to build acquaintances in society is a great thing, and to be friendly with them and associate with them is a good thing. But that when it comes to the idea of a friend, of who I call a friend, it's not a light matter that I give away freely. That colloquial term of friend is fine. We can call 1,000 people our friends, right? Facebook, everybody can be my friend, no problem. But when it comes to the matters of how I live my life and who has the right to influence me, I have to guard my perimeter and my barriers to find people who will be good sources of guidance and support for me, who will share my values and understand my priorities in life and help me make the right decisions when I am at conflict and difficulty in life. If I'm not careful of who I let in as my friend and who I let influence my personal affairs and matters, and that person doesn't share my qibla, tomorrow I will be the one on the Day of Judgment who sees that I had hidayah, I had guidance, but my association with these personalities made me make decisions that didn't fit my values, that didn't fit what my priorities were, that didn't agree with what my goal was, that I am living my life to get to heaven, that my goal in life is to build my relationship with Allah and attain reward from Him. So we have to be careful about this aspect that, yes, while it's true, Islam has taught us to treat well with people who are outside of your faith, it's also given us the restriction to be careful of the amount of influence they bear over your internal affairs. That to understand what your goal in life is and how to deal with that, you need someone who shares your qibla, who looks for guidance in the same place you do, who follows the same principles in life as you do, which brings us to the third category of society that we deal with, and that's amongst the Muslimin. Which when we take a look and we see in the Quran, Allah explains, He says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ فَاصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ. that certainly the believers are brothers. So make peace amongst your brothers. Build relations amongst your brothers. This statement, right? I mentioned to you a few nights ago the book of Al-Husayn Al-Ahwazi, Kitab Al-Mu'min. And in Kitab Al-Mu'min, we discussed only the first chapter, which was relevant to our discussion that night, which was talking about the believer and associating or dealing with and overcoming the difficulties in life and acknowledging that difficulties play a role in the life of a mu'min. But this book goes into other aspects of describing the character of a mu'min, including the relationship that mu'mineen should be keeping with one another. What are the rights that my brother has over me? What is the association I want to build with my brothers? What does it mean? How much of space should I give a mu'min in my life? There's one famous narration of our sixth Imam, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam. And it's a famous narration of where a man comes from a town outside and he visits our sixth Imam and he says to him, Yabna Rasulullah, in this town there are many mu'mineen. In our town, we have many people who follow you and follow your example. He says, what's your condition with one another? How do you deal with one another? He says, well, we ask about each other from time to time and, we keep aware of our affairs every so often. But, we're busy in life. Things get busy. But it's good. It's good. It's all right. And Imam says to him, he says, how close are you with one another? He says, we're close. It's okay. He says, do you have the permission that should one of you be in need that he can take from the other without having to ask him for his assistance? That if one of you is in a state of difficulty, that he knows I have the permission of my brother to use his resources without having to go to him and lower myself before him to ask him for that item. I can take what I need from him without having to worry about it. And the Shia, he looks and he says, no, Ibn Rasulullah, we don't have that characteristic amongst ourselves. We don't have that ability amongst ourselves. The Imam is teaching you that when it comes to your mu'min brother, that his respect is your respect. His relationship to you is a close relationship, that when his dignity or he's in a condition of difficulty, you should be there to help him without asking. He doesn't even need to lower himself before you to ask for assistance. You're there to help him before he has to ask in that regard. That you pay attention to the relationships and the closeness amongst each other so that you can benefit and talk to one another and you can rely on one another to attain the success that you want to attain in dunya and akhirah. That when I and someone else am traveling along the same path to the same goal, that this mu'min and I are sharing the same foundation, the fundamental, that I am going to do whatever I can to help him. And whenever I do that, Allah in turn will help me. Which is why we have the narrations that teach us that when our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when you pray for your believing brother without him having to ask you to pray for him, Allah answers that prayer and gives you whatever you asked for him as well. That the idea that we should be paying attention to one another and be aware of each other's needs and be looking after one another, and without having the need to ask, oh, please pray for me, I'm in this difficulty, or if you could help me in this situation, that we're conscientious of this relationship amongst each other because our ghaya, our goal is the same. We have the same desire, we want to get to the same point. That we want to be in the same place. We love the same personalities. Our friendships are those that are not rooted in convenience, but they are rooted in the fundamental love of Ali Muhammad. You see, that friend of convenience that you make in school, and those who are older will tell those who are younger, that those friends in high school, those friends in grade school, when you get older and life gets busy, or you go off to college, or you go off in different directions of life, you drift apart. You don't talk to each other much. You're busy in your life, they're busy in their life, and then slowly, eventually, you even forget their names at some point in time. Why? Because that friendship was a matter of convenience, and once convenience ended, that friendship ended. But the friendship of faith and the sharing of these values is such, I may not see you all year, but I know the love of Ahlul Bayt will bring you here. I know that the love of the family of the Prophet will bring you here and I will see you here. And no matter where I go in the world, there will always be a place where there is a place of azah that I can go to, and I will find the people with my values, with my traditions, with my fundamentals, with whom I can attach and take benefit from whenever I'm in a state of need or difficulty. That friendship that is based on the love of Ahlul Bayt is something that when we grow it and we develop it and we utilize it, that one, it helps us further our goals in life. It strengthens our resolve in society that we deal with. That now instead of me being one alone in society who doesn't use foul language or behaves with the best of character, there are now two of us and we stand together. Or there are three of us. Or all of us share the same values. And when I find myself in a situation that is difficult and I go to this brother or I go to this one who shares my iman, I know that I don't have to worry about it. He'll understand my values and support me. Now what happens unfortunately is because we see each other so much in these nights and these days, we wind up with conflict amongst ourselves sometimes. We wind up more importantly fighting amongst ourselves and more conflict amongst ourselves than we do with those people who don't share our faith. The Bob, the Joe, those people that I deal with at work, it's okay, I see them at work. They don't mean anything to me. It's all right. I can be patient with them. But the Abbas, the Haydar, the Ali, did you see he didn't say salam to me today? You see he took my parking spot. You see he didn't hold the door open for me. Did you see he put his shoes on top of mine? All of these little things, they become things that become conflict, not because there's true animosity amongst ourselves, but just the fact that since we're close together, these things at times happen. And that's the question, is how do we deal with it? And when we take a look, we see our Holy Prophet has taught us about this. He says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم اللهم صل على محمد لا يستقبل عبد حقيقة الإيمان حتى يرى المراء وإن كان محقا. That a believer does not taste or does not complete the reality of faith and iman, does not attain the high levels of iman, does not attain the completeness of faith, however you want to take a look at this statement, until he leaves the dispute, he leaves the argument, even if he is right. That true faith comes when we can put aside the disputes that happen amongst ourselves in the interest of our faith and iman. You see, sometimes when we have a dispute and we assume we're right, we assume that we have the responsibility to keep going, that no, I have to show him I'm right. He must know the truth. He must know he put his shoes on mine. We look at it in this way that no, I have the haqq. Why should I back away from it? Why should I step away from this fight or this argument or disagreement? I'm right. Rasulullah is teaching you that if you're right for the sake of Allah. You don't have to fight to prove it. If there is truth in your word, Allah will bring that truth about. Have yaqeen that the only one who matters if you are truthful is Allah. That He knows you are truthful. It's not the declaration among society. Don't continue fighting just to prove that you are right. No, leave it. When it comes to these relationships of creating harmony, leave the dispute. And leave the dispute with the interest that I know that I am doing the right for the sake of Allah, and Allah is the one who will guide me and assist me through this life. These structures, that when we start taking a look at our relationships in this format and we start recognizing that not everybody has the same right over me, I have to shift my system of interaction. That yes, I need to be humble when it comes to dealing with people in this world, but I have to be careful that I approach each relationship with conscientiousness. I don't give the wrong person the wrong right over me. That in this process, now I understand that my faith and what it means to be a person of faith, that the Muslim should have the most right over me, the mu'min should be the closest to me. And then based on that, everyone else fits into a scale. That every other individual who I come in contact with is someone who has a certain relationship with me. When we take a look and we see tonight marks that night in which we begin our discussion of the Masa'ib of Ali Muhammad. Up until tonight, we've been talking about these personalities who for their love of the Ahlul Bayt were ready to sacrifice everything for the Ahlul Bayt. that on the day of Ashura, when the day of sacrifice came, these were people who recognized the status of Ali Muhammad, and they recognized that no, you are the children of Rasulullah. You are the leaders of all of humanity. Your lives are more important than our own, that we would sacrifice everything for you. When the day of Ashura came and the family of the Prophet stepped forward, the Banu Hashim stepped forward, that we will be the first ones to go and make the sacrifices for Aba Abdullah, that our blood boils at the injustices and the harsh treatment that the grandson of Rasulullah has been given. The Ashab came forward with their hands folded and said, no, how can we remain alive when the children of Rasulullah are sacrificed? We will be the first to offer our sacrifice. And one by one, all of the companions, they went and they gave their sacrifices. And then it came time for the family of Ali Muhammad to make their sacrifices. Amongst the first were these two boys who were the children of Sayyidah Zainab, who had the honor and the status that was unlike the others that were present within all of the world. That from the one side, their parentage came from the lion of Allah, Ali ibn Abi Talib, and from the other came their parentage and lineage from the brave warrior, the other son of Abu Talib, Ja'far, the one who was known as At-Tayyar. That with pride they could say that our grandfather was one who fought in the way of Allah until both of his arms were cut, and still he did not release the banner of Islam. Such was his dedication to the religion of Islam that Allah granted him wings with which he flies in heaven for the sacrifices he made. And from the other side, they were the grandchildren of the lion of Allah, and they had been sent with a particular purpose. From their father's side, Abdullah ibn Ja'far, they had two qualities. One was the quality that Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar was known as, of being brave. And the other quality that they had from their father, Abdullah, that he was known as being one who was generous in the way of Allah. Maybe this is why when Abu Abdullah prepared to leave from the city of Medina, Abdullah came to him and he says, Ya Imam al-Husayn, I wish that my health was good, that I would go with you, but as you are leaving, why don't you take my two sons with you? Let them travel with you. Let these two boys, Awn and Muhammad, be your companions in this journey. And Abu Abdullah said, it's okay for them to come with me. He says, Ya Abu Abdullah, with your permission, may I speak to my wife Zainab one time before you leave and you are gone? And Imam al-Husayn sent Abbas, take Abdullah to go see Zainab. When Hazrat Abdullah ibn Ja'far came to the camel upon which Sayyidah Zainab was, Sayyidah Zainab said, Oh Abdullah, don't forget that I had asked you when my brother Hussein shall leave. Don't stop me from going. I will listen to you if you tell me to, but I don't know how I can live without my brother Hussein. Hussein has been my companion since we were very small children. You must remember, and we must remember, that the relationship of Sayyidah Zainab and her brother was such that they say when the infant Zainab in the lap of her mother would cry, the only thing that would silence her was to look at the face of Abu Abdullah. That she had been one who, through all the trials and tribulations that were placed on the mountain of patience that is Zainab, the one that was her constant companion was Imam al-Husayn. So when Abdullah ibn Ja'far came, Sayyidah Zainab says in fear, she says, please don't separate me from my brother. He has been my support from the moment that we were little and we went through the first great loss of our grandfather. And then when we lost our mother. And then he was there when my father was taken and when my brother was killed in the worst of fashions. Abdullah ibn Ja'far says, no, I did not come, Zainab, to stop you. I came to say to you, if you should find Hussein in a state of difficulty, if there becomes a danger to his life, then I have sent these two boys with you. One present on your own behalf for the protection of the son of Zahra, and the other one present on my behalf as a protection for the son of Zahra. This was the excellence of Awn and Muhammad, that on the night of Ashura, when they describe the events of the night of Ashura, Imam al-Husayn gathers all of his companions, the few that were left, and all of the family that was left, into a tent. And he puts out the light and he says, listen, they are thirsty for my blood. not for yours. Each of you companions leave this place, and each of you take one of the children or one of the boys from my family and leave. Just leave with me Akbar, because he will be my sacrifice to Allah, and I will present him to Allah myself. The rest of you leave. When Abu Abdullah turned on the light, the companions first presented their fealty, and they said, Ya Abu Abdullah, should they be those people who were to kill us, then cut our body into 1,000 pieces, then burn us, and were this to happen to us 1,000 times, we swear we would never leave you alone, Abu Abdullah. Then after they were finished, the Banu Hashim turned, and the first amongst the Banu Hashim, even before in various maqatil is written, even before Abu al-Fadl, these two boys owned Muhammad and came forward and said, Uncle, we will never leave you. We will sacrifice our lives for you. Oh, Uncle, you are more dear to us than our own lives. How were these children raised that they knew the value of their Imam in such a way? When they describe the conversations on the night of Ashura, one mu'arrikh narrates, he says there was a conversation between Zainab and her two boys. They write and they say that Zainab sat in the tent with her sons in her tent, and she said, don't forget your lineage tomorrow. Tomorrow you must be the first amongst all the others to go and fight bravely for your uncle. Make sure that no harm comes to your uncle as far as you are alive. That you are my presentation before your uncle, that you must ensure that he is protected and his faith is protected. And these two boys turned and they said, Oh mother, by the right in which you have raised us, we will not take a moment of peace as long as we are alive. We will sacrifice everything for our uncle. And then the day of Ashura came, and these two young men, they were boys. They were described in such a way that one of them could get on the horse by himself, but the other one was not even big enough to sit on the horse on his own without help. They came to their uncle and they asked permission, and they said, give us permission to fight. And they would not be given permission until eventually they came back to their mother and they complained, Oh mother, our uncle does not give us permission to fight. You must intercede on our behalf. And eventually Sayyidah Zainab asks her brother for the permission that let my sons go and fight. Let them see the power of the children of Haydar. Let them see the children of Ja'far and how they do battle. The two brothers were given permission. They entered the battlefield. They made the decision that one would attack from the right, one would attack from the left, and they would meet in the center of the army to break the army before their uncle. They would show that Hazrat Abbas, who had trained us in the art of warfare, that, oh uncle, we learned our lessons well, that though we are thirsty for 3 days, you will see the bravery in our attacks on this army. They say that Muhammad, who was the older of the two, he killed over 19 of the soldiers, that he killed from more than 2 of the horsemen, more than 8 of the foot soldiers, until eventually he was struck and he fell from his horse. And eventually his brother Aun, when he fell, the two brothers called out, Oh uncle, take our salam, we are leaving you from this world. Abu Abdullah went and collected these youths and brought them back to the tents, as he brought back all of the shuhada. But when he looked amongst the women, he says, Oh Fidda, where is their mother? Why does not she bid farewell to her boys? Every mother has come to bid farewell to her boys, and look at the sacrifice that was made in her way. Fidda, bring their mother, bring Zainab forward. The narrations write that say that Zainab sat between the two of them, put her hands on them and said, Oh Allah, accept this small sacrifice from us. One mu'arrikh writes that Zainab did not weep when her sons died. The famous historians, they narrate that Zainab did not die. When they asked the question, why did Zainab not cry to lose 2 young sons that you have raised with your own hands? Is difficult for any mother. And when those 2 sons should have the character that Aun and Muhammad did, the love of the Imam as these 2 did, the bravery in their hearts as these 2 did, the honor in their hearts that they wanted to defend in front of an army of so many, how is it that a mother did not cry? One of the narrators, he writes, he says, I think that maybe Zainab did not weep because she was worried that her weeping would break the heart of her brother Husayn ibn Ali. That her weeping would break the confidence of Imam al-Husayn. That Imam al-Husayn would feel bad that he has taken such a sacrifice from his sister. So Zainab did not weep over her children so that her brother should not feel bad over the sacrifice she had given. Another one presents a different opinion, who says that Sayyida Zainab did not weep in that instance because she said, whatever I can give to protect the son of Zahra, it means nothing to me today. If by maybe this I have protected the life of Hussein, the life of Hussein is more important than anything that I own. Would that I have more, I would have given more to protect Hussein on this day. They describe and they say that on the 11th of Muharram, every mother turned in the battlefield to give one final look to the deceased that she left on the battlefield. Every mother looked as she was put into chains and tied to camels to say, oh my son, look at the condition that I am in now. Why don't you come to your mother's aid now? Don't you see what they have done to us, where they have taken our rida and they have put us in such condition? But they say there was one who was Zainab, who never looked to her children but looked to Hussein. When they describe on that day, they say Zainab threw herself from the camel and crawled to her brother, that brother, we have never been separated in life. Today when I leave you, you have no cheeks for me to kiss. They said Zainab kissed the cutthroat of Abu Abdullah in that moment, but there was no mention of Own or Muhammad in that incident. The Masa'ib of Own and Muhammad are not so simple. Even in the entrance of Sham, when every mother looked at the head of her son, every sister looked at the head of her brother, Zainab only looked to Hussein. When the heads were returned to the Shuhada in Sham, and they were brought forward, every woman collected the head of her child and her son, except these two heads that waited. That the soldiers asked, were these orphans that fought for Hussein? Was there no one to weep over them or to take their head? And the women explained, no, their mother is Zainab, who weeps over Hussein, not over her children. Sayyidah Zainab, as long as she had the responsibility to show the message of Abu Abdullah, she never wept for these two boys until she returned back to Medina. When she returned back to Medina, she found the moment of separation from Imam Zainul Abidin. Imam Zainul Abidin turned and he says, oh my aunt, let me return you to your house now. And Zainab looked at her nephew and she says, oh nephew, after all we have been through, after all we have lost, now you want to leave me too. And Imam Zainul Abidin says it's appropriate for you to return to your house. When the nephew and the aunt walked through the empty streets of Medina, where the sounds of the Mahalla Bani Hashim, they would hear their brothers, they would hear their children. They walked to the door of Sayyidah Zainab. It came time for the two to part. The nephew held his aunt, the aunt held her nephew, and they began weeping. In their state of weakness of weeping, they sat on the stoop in front of the door of the house of Abdullah ibn Ja'far, and they wept because they could not stand. And they wept over the Masa'ib they had seen. Abdullah ibn Ja'far came to his door and he turned to his children, oh children, did I not instruct you, when a poor person comes to the house, immediately fulfill their need. Don't make them wait for me. Zainab turned to Abdullah. Abdullah, don't you recognize me? I am Zainab. I have returned home after the Masa'ib. I have come back to my house. Sayyidah Zainab entered her house and she remembered the children that ran in this house. She went and sat between the two beds of Own and Muhammad. One hand on the bed of Own, one on the hand of Muhammad. Oh my children, where have I left you? Where have you gone now? Now Zainab would weep for her children of Own and Muhammad. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ماتم حسين.